All right, so this week's prompt, let's see. Please discuss ways that you believe organizations can prepare leaders at all levels to respond in a crisis. Consider in this discussion the communication issues faced by BP in the spill and the failures of crisis communication. So who wants to start?
Sorry, you guys are breaking up a little bit. I'm trying to fix that.
I think every leader should go through just a little bit of maybe what to do and how to handle yourself in a crisis. I know obviously when you get put into that situation, it's hard to decide what you're going to do, but if a company just sets up morals that you need to follow even when something is going wrong for the company, I think that would play out better than what BP did.
Yeah, I think having those companies' values, and because then, I mean, you don't have to guess and react when something happens. You can just pretty much say the values again and hope that gets the job done.
I agree.
That kind of ties into the book too. There's like a section on pre-crisis leadership, which is about like talking to your followers or employees, like discussing what you're going to do if a crisis does arise. It's like crisis readiness, identifying possible trouble spots and stuff. And he maybe would have done that a little bit better, than the situation resolved a lot faster, because I think they honestly just like worked that and just had no idea what to do.
A lot of times companies don't really train on that as much. It's like brief conversation, like if this happens, your leader will know what to do. But I was in a leadership role and we were supposed to have little like safety areas in case of fire and things like that. And I didn't even know where they were because I wasn't even trained on them. And like in that moment, I'm supposed to be the one that leads everyone to those areas. And I'm gonna have to go find the map where they are. Like those, I feel like those are the kind of things that lead to what happened. Like still like people weren't trained properly and they were told they could cut those corners.
I think it's a necessity to actually have like a pre-crisis plan put in play. But I also think like during the crisis, I mean, you can practice out situations, but when something actually really happens, you never know like how you're actually gonna undergo through the situation. Because you can practice as much as you want, but you know it's fight or flight kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the book was talking about like the skills that a good leader should have, basically for these crisis situations, and like one big one was sense making. So it was just a matter of being able to just kind of take on a situation and be able to just come up with a good solution from there. I mean, you're never going to know when a crisis hits, and the whole BP thing was crazy. You know, and they came up with answers left and right on trying to get that whole thing to kind of simmer down. So, I mean, sense making would be a big part of it. Without that, you can't really figure out the right action plan. And then it was cool how it kept labeling from there. Because, like, one of them was, if I remember right, it was like issue selling, which basically means that you as a leader, you see a problem or you see one happening. Like, say you're using your sense making and you kind of just foresee something critical in the future. Your ability to basically sell that issue to your upper management or to your owners or whatever in order for them to actually investigate and actually start trying to do these preventative efforts is supposed to be a really big skill that a leader should have, especially one at a higher position, and one that, I mean, if you kind of tie this back down to BP, I'm pretty sure there's probably quite a bit going wrong prior to just that whole spill that happened, you know, so trying to get ahead of it, I guess.
Yeah, and something else they talked about in the book.
I apologize, guys. I can't really hear you. If it doesn't sound like I respond, I'm having a lot of trouble with the breakup of the video.
Uh-oh.
So.
Another thing they talked about in the book was a crisis risk assessment, and I think that is kind of a huge. If you do one thing, you should assess maybe what potentially could go wrong, because I think BP was kind of ignorant to think that maybe a spill would never happen. I think they should have been more prepared than how they were, especially since if they took the time to assess what could happen, maybe they could have realized how big of a deal it could have and what was.
Right, and I also think like outside resources, like because money for the oil and everything, so that really wanted them to like push to keep going and keep drilling and everything. So that's probably why also, I mean, it happened. I mean, I don't know if it could have been prevented. Maybe if they would have stopped, it obviously would have been prevented, but they were influenced by outside sources. So
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think a lot
I mean,
of
that's
times,
definitely going to be an issue when you have something that's so valuable. You know what I mean? Like the ethics of how much drilling is too much drilling, or where to drill, or I mean, drilling in the ocean's super touchy to begin with, because you know that's the ultimate risk. Is as soon as the pipe breaks, it's going to completely go into the water system there. So, I mean, the pressure of just the whole, obviously the world running off of it, probably aids to a lot of bad decisions.
I feel like a lot of times when things, like you were talking about how it was money and people are like pushing and things like that, I feel like safety honestly tends to be the first thing that goes. So I feel like that kind of led to that as well. Because a lot of times they're like, you need more of this and you need to do this. And then people's safety gets compromised and things like that. Because I see that happen all the time at work.
Well, and part of that probably comes from like the people making the decisions, the executives at the top aren't the ones being put into those unsafe situations.
Yep. Which is probably a lot of what happened with BP is all those people at the top were making those decisions and not those people that were physically out there and had to deal with all of that. And they weren't out there themselves cleaning or any of that.
So you guys think there's a big disconnection between the people on the floor versus the people higher up?
definitely.
Yeah.
Making those decisions?
I think especially in like crisis situations, because you're supposed to, you can't call them in that moment. And they're kind of like speaking for everyone, even though they weren't there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were like completely disconnected from the issue. They're like, well, this is what our company does. And you're like, that's not what our company does, not in that moment.
Looking
you
over
saying
the different types of a crisis, I think it matters what type of crisis is happening too. I mean, because like a product recall is pretty small in comparison to like a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
So
Some technical difficulties here.
So I mean, like, I don't know if you can really prepare for something like a terrorist attack like you can like a product recall. But you can almost have like statements ready to go.
Yeah.
A company for a recall, but not like a bombing.
Right.
Plus, like, recall's kind of like on the company. Like, obviously, they like messed up somewhere, probably overlooked something somewhere. But something like a terrorist attack is like completely out of their control. That's really not like an internal problem of the company, but more of an external problem.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times with those kind of things, in those moments that you can't prepare for, it's picking those leaders who have that we talked about having those good morals that we picked. Because those are the ones that are going to be able to make those decisions. Or in those moments, if you have those leaders who are super flawed, then they're not going to respond as well to those crises that you can't prepare for.
And I also think that's why risk assessment is so big, because when I planned a gay pride festival in my town, and one of the things we had to do was assess the risks. We needed to figure out parking, we needed to figure out food and beverage, but we also needed to have police there just in case there was a shooting or just in case something external did happen. So even something as small as just a festival in my town that you guys have never even heard of is like, we took into account all those what ifs, and thank God nothing happened, but if something did, then we had a plan.
Right.
Do you guys think that the crisis with BP was one of those that they could have kind of prepared for, or was one of those that they were, in that moment, they might not have known what to do?
I mean, absolutely. I don't think they knew what to do. I think when you get in the situation, like Darren said, it's fight or flight. You just do what kind of comes naturally. But being able to, I don't know, not being completely ignorant to the fact that an explosion could have happened might have made it not such a shock, or like.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Because when you're working with that kind of equipment, you know, it's not impossible.
Sorry, I had to exit and come back. What are we talking about exactly?
I asked her if she thought that the BP oil spill was like the type of crisis you can really prepare for, if it's one of those that you can think about, but until it happens, you don't really know.
Oh, okay. I mean, has anybody dealt with like a pretty bad crisis at their wherever they work? Like something where it's like, oh, snap. What do I do?
Well, just the other day, there was a fire right outside where I work. And thank God there had been a fire previously, because that's the only reason I knew where the fire extinguisher was. But I didn't know how to use it. So I feel like I was very ill prepared. So I like went and got the fire extinguisher, but stood there with the fire extinguisher I didn't know how to use.
In all reality, I feel like that would be me as well, and I used to be a leader in a kitchen that lit on fire multiple times. And I was like, there even is our fire extinguisher.
Like,
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
that
I actually lucked out. It was I was unemployed. Like I worked here and there at different apartment complexes, and I was just doing my route, just a normal route, making sure that everything was good. The complex was looking clean. And I drive by and I get flagged down by a resident because their apartment's on fire. And all you see is a bunch of smoke, right? And we had just gone through like our fire training, like on what to do, how to handle it, what to say. But I run in there and they basically had they had a fireplace, but they didn't open the flint. And so all the fire and all the soot was just going into their apartment, and it actually caught some things on fire. So I had to run in there, go to our kind of plan of action, which was basically, go under the sink, find the extinguisher, put out the fire, and then basically walk them through the entire process afterwards of how to handle a fire issue, how to contact their renter's insurance, police departments, fire departments. It was a big old deal. And somewhat handled it properly, but kind of damaged their apartment a little bit by trying to take care of it. So I got a little smack on the wrist there. What was that?
I think the damage was inevitable, but I think the way you handled it was probably perfect, and the way you were trained was obviously better than some companies.
Right. Well, I technically really shouldn't. It's not like nothing forcing you to go in there. So it was just kind of like do you want to try, or do you want to just kind of sit back, let it get worse, and call the fire department?
Right.
The only other crisis that we've ever dealt with has been lease paperwork. So a big problem that happened was your lease contract is legally binding. What you sign is what you get. And there was a lot of, they didn't notice this, but they basically had sent out about 30, 40 lease contracts that had, at the end of the day, these people were going to be paying $6,000 to $7,000 less over the sum of their contract in that year. And it wasn't caught until after they signed all these contracts. So then basically the manager was left to deal with the situation of how is she going to explain this loss of close to $50K for the year just on this handful of apartment units because these contracts were, sent out. Big issue is legally binding. They signed it, you signed it. You know what I mean? How do you go from there? So she had to quite a bit to just basically be okay with the company, because that wasn't something that they were expecting. And it definitely was I would call it like an internal crisis, because then we had to be the ones to deal with it.
I feel like the main ones that I see are the ones, I mean, people get stuck on rides, which everybody hears about online, but usually we don't consider it a crisis at Disneyland until it's more than about 20 minutes. But the other day we had someone stuck on a ride for like 3 hours, and that was, you have to call the fire department out and everything else. And it doesn't happen that often. We have all these safety protocols for it, and we have water and stuff that gets taken up there, but I mean, it is an attraction and it does happen. But the team that was doing it, my boyfriend was actually on it, and he was the leader of it, and he's like, his other lead was like, I can't go up there, it's too high. And he was like, that's not an option, you are the leader. Like, we're sharing the responsibility, you literally have to go up there.
Yeah.
No, it's too high. He was like, then don't work this attraction.
I think one that was more related to the book is we actually had people calling us, well, not specifically racist or nothing, but they were claiming that we judged them unfairly. So we weren't following fair housing. And they basically, in other words, were calling us racist, prejudice, all types of stuff in our reviews, right? And so we get contacted from corporate, like, what the heck is this? Like, why is this person singling your property out, saying that you're not following fair housing laws and that you're discriminating against their, you know, their background and their ethnicity? And even though it's completely untrue, once something like that is out in the public and it's on your reviews, like, everybody sees it, right? So everybody from corporate's like on our butts about it, basically, like, you guys need to fix this. You need to fix this now, because our public relations, the way people are viewing us is horrible right now. And it took our ratings from like a 4.5 to a 2 within, I don't know, a few weeks. Because they say that for every good experience, you tell one person, and for every bad experience, you tell 10. And it definitely seemed like once that one person started saying something, all these people that weren't even residents, people that had just came by, were starting to say these things, even though it wasn't factual. So we had to go through a whole process of retraining and all types of stuff just to try to avoid it. So I guess, yeah, that happened last year, so it was a while ago.
We're like over time by a couple minutes if you guys want to wrap.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Good talk.
Sounds good. All right. Hey, guys.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, guys. Have a good day.
Bye.
Take care, guys. Be safe.
Take care.